Welcome to Money, Manifestation, and Business, the podcast that shows you how to use your energy, intention, and consciousness to reprogram your money mindset, unleash a new level of possibility, and create a life and business that lights you up. I'm your host, Jamie Berman, and I invite you to join me each week for a dose of inspiration, coaching, and teachings to help you rewrite your money story, create abundance on your terms, and grow your business in a way that's fully aligned for you. This is going to be so much fun. Let's dive in. So I have the most amazing treat for you today on this episode. I have my amazing client and dear friend, Whitney Uland here, who, oh my gosh, I just can't wait for you to share your story. Whitney came into the money manifestation movement about a year ago. I think it was almost exactly a year ago. And then about 6 months after, upgraded into the mastermind. And your before and after story, oh my gosh, I'm just so inspired. I have witnessed Whitney really step into her power in more ways than just around money. Money has been one of them, but I feel like when you do work on your relationship with money, the ripple effect is so big in your life. So I'm so excited to hear about your journey. I mean, I've witnessed you stepping into your power, making so much freaking money. It's amazing. You change your relationship with debt. It just feels like you seem like a different person than you were a year ago. Would you agree?
Oh my gosh, 100%.
Yeah. So I definitely want to interview you and dissect your brain and get all of the good thoughts and the juiciness and hear how you did it and all the things so that we can all borrow your amazing thoughts. And then I want to talk about your business too, because Whitney has such a cool and unique business where she helps people step into fame and step into celebrity energy. So first, can you tell us a little bit about that and what you do? And then I would love to ask you all the things.
Sure. Yes. So thank you so much for having me. I really do. I'm like, wow, it has been such a transformation. And I didn't think I'd be here, but yeah, I am a life coach for people who want to be famous. So most of my clients are artists, creatives, influencers, creative entrepreneurs. So anyone who wants to make a positive impact in the world and would benefit from having a large following or what I call the resource of fame. That's who I help. And I do that by helping my clients create celebrity energy, which is basically the it factor. And it's what connects people to you so that they want to be, they want to pay you. They want to be part of whatever it is that you are selling or, whatever it is that you're creating. So it's a lot of fun. I'm sure, I hope you feel the same way, but I feel like I have the best clients in the whole world. The clients that I work with are all just amazing. So it's a really fun, totally agree. I love my business. It's great.
Yes. And it's working for you. The celebrity energy and stepping into it is working for you, Whitney. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious first, I want to talk about energetic set points, right? And we talk about this in my programs, which if you're not familiar with it, it's basically like the income level that you feel comfortable with and the energy that you feel comfortable with. So let's talk about money first, because you've had such a big transformation around your relationship with money this year. And I'm curious, what was your energetic set point, say 1 year ago versus where it is now?
Okay. And it's interesting too, because when I joined your program, the movement, I'd been in business for several years, and I actually felt like I was in a pretty good place with business for a while, right? I was doing, I would say what felt really good for me, my minimum was $6K, absolute minimum, but I was averaging between $6 and $12K per month. And then I got pregnant, and Jamie, that set point moved down to $200. It just and I think, I had the belief, especially at the time, and I didn't join the movement until after my baby was born. And I had just gotten to a point where I was like, we got to figure something out, because apparently, I think I had definitely just been well, I'm pregnant. I just just have a lot going on or whatever. And in really like digging through this work, I realized it really was a lot of blocks around being a mom and being a woman who makes money and is a fantastic mom. And so it's interesting. Like I do think that like my set point definitely went down and like decreased because I had been on that autopilot, and there just were so many, programs running. And what I had seen was possible was, and basically the story that you couldn't be a good mom and make a lot of money, and that I needed to be home with my child, and I needed to, all of those limiting beliefs. But I think at the time that I joined, I feel like I was making like anywhere from $200. I think I had months where I didn't make anything, and then maybe like $3,000 or $4,000, but none of it was consistent. And it just like all of it just felt really out of my control.
Yes. Yes. I remember when you came in, you totally lost that belief that I can make money, and felt like, I remember that was like, you felt like it was totally at the whim of like, whether someone signed up or not. And there was no empowerment there. And that shifted fairly quickly. So first, tell me, where are you now, just 1 year later? You were at like 200 a month, maybe.
Yeah. I would say,
now?
If we're looking like energetic set point, like minimum, I would say minimum 25,000, but I've done more than that a few months as well, doing 35, 45,000 as well. But I feel like I'm like, oh, I could like close my eyes and sleep all month and still make at least like 25, which is crazy considering where I was.
Right? Like 1 year later, how amazing. So what I want to talk about is what was it that you had, like, what were the shifts that occurred that allowed this to happen, that allowed you to go from 200 maybe a month, not feeling like your income was out of your control and there was a lot of worry and panic around it, to now you're just in this like very peaceful, like, of course I'm going to make $20,000 minimum a month. What were some of the things and some of the shifts that took place throughout the year that really contributed to you being able to do this now and be in this place?
Yeah, so there's so many, but there's two that really stand out to me. And I think one of them was something that was like this, like, I just feel like a gift you gave me before. And this was really the kind of like this transformation that I had that empowered me to sign up and start working with you, was that I had just never considered that making money was something you could just learn how to do. Like, I just had always had this kind of belief that it was like for certain people or special people or people who'd been born into wealth or whatever, instead of thinking of it as just like a skill that I could learn. And I think that like, again, I just had never considered that. And so when I signed up, it was just kind of this realization of like, oh, that's something that I could do. Then why don't I do that? And I think that has really been something that I just continue to come back to, is like anytime I feel stuck. And then the second one that I would say is something that you've really helped me with is just realizing that like my brain is just always maybe going to be afraid that I'm not going to make money. Like that's just something that it does. That's what our brains do. And I think just in realizing that pattern, it has given me a lot of space to then see it and to not think anything has gone wrong, because it's never the doubt that creates the lack of belief in making money. It's the like defeatism. I don't know if that's a word, but like the defeatist attitude that comes with that, right? When it's like you stop believing and then we're like, oh my God, now I can't do it. And from that place, then we stop taking the aligned action and doing the things that generate money. And so I think just kind of that combination of being like, oh, this is a skill that I can get good at. And my brain is always going to tell me that I'm going to run out of money. And just like how I thought that last time, I'm thinking that now, and I got out last time. So I'm going to get out of that now as well. So I think that both of those just like really empowered me to continue growing and like increasing as I grow.
So good. Yes, right. Because it's not, like you said, it's not the doubt. It's just believing the doubt. But when you can understand that it's just a pattern that your brain has, then it's like you can hold space for it, right? And like let it be there, but not take it so seriously. And I think that's the power of having a coach, because I know the same for me. Whenever my coach can reflect like, oh, Jamie, look, this is what you do. This is what you bring up every month. Like, here we are, right? It's kind of like when you're on your cycle and it's like, oh, it's this time of the month, right? Like, this is what happens. Same things with our brain. And one of my favorite quotes was by Jack Kornfield. And he said, enlightenment is just understanding your own neuroses. right? So it's like when you can understand your own patterns, your own thoughts, that's enlightenment. And that's what you've done is like
100%.
you've learned what your brain does and not make it a problem and learn how to work with it and look at what you've created from that. It's so awesome. And I also want to
Yes.
touch on this, that making money is a skill that anyone can learn, that I wholeheartedly believe. And of course, teach y'all. It's like just something that most of us haven't been taught. We aren't taught this in school. Like people don't tell us that this is a skill that you can learn and that it's really important to work on your thoughts about money because it really impacts your bottom line in business. So I'm curious. I'm going to just dig in and get curious with you. What do you think are some of the skills that you've mastered other than holding space for your like unconscious brain? But are there skills that you've learned or new thoughts that you've picked up that have really helped you in order to like make money?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest thing that came up is also, I think this was like maybe the second month that I was in your program, but where we really worked on feeling first. And really just like, I think that so much of this work does come down to your feelings and come down to what you're feeling about like yourself and what you can create. And so getting into the feeling of safety, I feel like has been such an important skill for me because for me, and money's a resource, is the same as water is a resource, like something that we need to survive, right? So of course, when that feels threatened, it makes sense that then our body kind of goes into that fight or flight mode and stops having access to that creativity that where we actually can create from and where we can put value into the world. And so I think for me, just being able to really master those feelings and be able to feel into what it would feel like first and what it feels like to have certainty even in rough times or even when there are doubts around or whatever. I think that's been a skill. And then also just like I feel like you've something I love about coaching with you is like you're so great at helping us kind of see like our own genius and see our own like what works for us. And so for me, it's really about tapping into like my desires. And I really like, I feel like as soon as I have a desire for something, I'm able to create the money for it, whether that is saving or an expense or, whatever that is. I feel like being able to get really clear on that and clear on, my own process, but also just, I feel like you've really helped me, and helped me feel so empowered to trust my desires and to trust myself. And like that, honestly, like, I feel like that level of trust is like what ultimately creates the money, if that makes sense.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And that kind of leads me into, I want to like dissect your money making process or your manifestation process, because I always talk about this and share that it's like there's no one size fits all in terms of manifestation. So I give you all so many practices and ideas and thoughts and new things to try. And then your opportunity is always to try it on and see what fits and see what works for you. And you've found your manifestation process. So I want to dive into what that is for you. And you touched on one thing was, the feeling first. So another thing that we've talked about in the movement is to find your money-making emotion. Like, what is that feeling that you tap into that does allow you to make money? So do you know what your money-making emotions are?
Yes. So my money making emotions are the biggest one is sturdy, which is such a funny like word. I've never really heard people talk about that before in terms of making money, but I've used this example before, but my dream car has always been a Jeep Wrangler, and I finally was able to get my dream car this year, which is so exciting.
Manifestation.
Yes, exactly. And I really feel like it was for me getting the car, like all of this kind of ties together, is like what helps me make money is to think about when I'm in a Jeep and you hit, like I'm in Los Angeles, right? So I hit potholes all the time, and like being able to hit a pothole, but the car absorbs the shock, right? So it's like you can have a big hit and you still feel safe, you still feel secure, you still feel sturdy. And to me, that's the emotion that I have to lean into to make money, right? Where it's like, again, it's holding space for doubt, it's holding space for an unexpected expense or whatever it is that life has thrown our way, and just still being able to hold space for the beliefs. So I think that's been a huge one. And then really just being able to tap into desire. Like, I think that that's a huge part of my process, is getting really clear on my desires and getting clear on, and I kind of like oscillate back and forth between big, like long-term desires versus what do I want this week? What am I trying to call in this week? In terms of money, but in terms of experiences and all of those things. And ultimately, I feel like once I get in tune with my desires and I give myself permission to want those things, then it's about tapping into that emotion of certainty and sturdy and stability, that like, even no matter what, if I'm hitting a pothole in life or whatever, then I can still create that desire.
That's so good. I love it. I love it. That is so good. And I love the analogy of the Jeep and just being able to picture that, right? As like sturdy as the money-making emotion. Because I think a lot of us think it has to be like abundance or like feel magical and amazing all the time. And if we don't feel high vibe all the time, we can't make money. And I'm like, no, like that's not true. Billionaires aren't happy all the freaking time, right? So
Yes.
sturdy. It's like you just have to be sturdy. Totally. That's so good. And then tapping into your desires. I love that. I'm curious because you've broken through a lot of upper limits this year. Do you have something that helps you with that? Like, let's say we were going to like do a little fun challenge for next month and make more money than you've ever made. What feels like 50K or 60K, something like that?
Yeah, right now I'm kind of going back and forth between 60 and 80. I feel
Okay.
like for me, I do actually feel the most, I get the most desire when I go for a big stretch goal. And so even if I don't fully hit it doesn't knock me down to not hit a goal, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But the desire and the excitement of it is really helpful.
Do you have another practice or process that helps you in terms of upper limits and working through like the next thing? Is there anything else besides the desire piece and really getting into that sturdy energy? Is there anything else that helps, or maybe not? I'm just curious.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think and part of the reason I think for me that I love those like high, like big stretch goals, is for me, I'm just a dreamer, right? Like I'm an artist as well, filmmaker. Like, so I think that that's what's exciting to me, but also part of the reason that I like that is because it really challenges my identity and it challenges me to like make transformation in the fastest way possible. So I think for me, it's also about like what I'm kind of working on right now is feeling into those like 60 to 80K months, right? Like that 83 would be $1 million in a year. And just realizing that like that to me has a lot of weight and a lot of like identity wrapped up into it. But even as far as like, I mean, I'll just share this in case it's helpful for anyone on the podcast, especially when we're talking about like being in like a high vibe energy or whatever. Over this last year, not only was I, going like first year of being a mom, but I'm also going through a divorce. And like, that's just been like so challenging and emotional and heavy and things like that. And yet while I've been going through that has been like the most successful months of my business. Right. And so, but I think that all of that, the reason I was able to do it was because I had figured out kind of this process of like leaning into my desire, getting into that emotion, and also like really tackling the identity. So at that point it was, can I be like a rich single mom? Like my experience, and I like grew up, my mom was divorced before she married my dad, but like for her, she was evicted from her home. My sister was evicted from her home, like both of them when they became single mothers. And so for me, it really was about challenging the narrative of like, what does it look like to be a single mom? And like, can I bust through these upper limits in that way? And so I think that's kind of what's next for me. And it's been interesting. Like for me, I find the fastest changes when I attack the identity, which it also makes sense. That's what I coach my clients on as well, about like, to become a celebrity, you have to step into that, embody that identity. But I really do think that when you attack the identity, that's what kind of like transforms all the areas of your life, because it challenges our sense of self. And so it kind of becomes this like ego death. You kind of have to like burn the ships, burn who you are in order to become that next version. But instead of just focusing on a money goal or focusing on just, whatever that is, whether it's a follower count or, any goal that you have, if instead you attack the identity, it's going to change all of the aspects of your life simultaneously. And just really like, it will reveal very quickly where your blocks are. So I feel like that's kind of been my secret hack, I guess, if that makes sense.
So good. So good. And that's why I love coaching so much and going after something big that you've never created before. Because once you can do it in one area, all of a sudden you have the like special key. Now you're like, oh, I've changed my identity around money. Now, like, I know the path. That means that I get to do things differently in this area as a single mom, and I get to decide what my identity is. And it's just got such a big ripple effect. So I think it's like, it's so fun to have more money. Of course it is. It's amazing. But there's such a gift in like starting and doing that work because the ripple effect is just massive. And I've seen that in you, and it's amazing and it's so inspiring. And one other thing that I really notice about you, Whitney, is you're so coachable. Like when I say that, I mean, everyone's coachable, but what I mean is your brain is so coachable. It's like you're willing to change your thoughts. It's like, I notice that you're not like so grabbing on so tightly to an old identity or an old thought. You're like, because I've even mentioned things before. I'm like, why don't we give you a month to step into this new thought? You're like, oh no, by next week I got this. So I'm just curious, do you have a thought that allows you, or a belief, like what is it that allows you to take on new thoughts without, so I just noticed you don't have a lot of resistance to it. Like you'll just step into a new thought. You'll decide what you want to believe and you go for it. Do you know?
That's a really high compliment. So I appreciate that. And it's funny because even at the beginning of this call, when you're like, you've made these changes so quickly, I'm like, have I? It feels slow to me. But then I also just this morning when I was on the treadmill, I was doing this exercise kind of to just show my brain what I'm capable of. And as I'm stepping into these this new identity of like being a millionaire, I've been looking back at, okay, what are some other things I didn't believe that I could do and how did I get out of it? And I do think that a lot of this for me has just been, I have so many reps in of coaching myself and having new identities and having new things that like, because when I was thinking about it, I was like, let me think about something 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and that I didn't think I could do. And now I did. And when I was thinking about the things from 10 years ago, I was like, oh yeah. And then it took me a couple of years to be able to create this result. Whereas when I was thinking about, a result recently, I was like, oh yeah, that took me like 3 weeks to be able to create. Right. Yeah. So, but I don't know. I mean, maybe this is not giving myself enough credit, but I do feel like I've been knocked around enough by life lately that it's just kind of like, all right, we'll keep going. And, having just so many identity shifts back to back about, becoming a mom, then becoming or being pregnant, all of those things I do think has made my brain pretty malleable. And just kind of willing to be like, all right, well, I've done things in the past that blew my mind, so I can probably do that with this too.
Yeah. I love that. And that's sometimes the gift of going through hard things. Like there is always, it builds character. There's a gift in that, right? Because look at you now. It's like, oh my God, if I could do that, shoot, I could do anything. And you believe it. And you believe in the power of your thoughts and manifestation because you have so much evidence now. So awesome.
And I kind of think like when you said like you've witnessed me become more empowered, like I think that's kind of what it is, right? It's like it's like a combination of a belief in myself, but also just a really deep belief in the process of how all of these things work. And so kind of this, and I feel like when you can rely not only on yourself, but also on some tools, then it's like, I think the skill here, maybe this is the answer, is that I'm pretty good at holding space when I doubt. So it's like, because that's where I really do think we get into a lot of like self-sabotage or quit putting things out there. But I think now like the skill is just being like, okay, I didn't think I could do this in the past. So I probably and I did, so I can probably do that again, if that makes sense.
Best skill you can learn as an entrepreneur. Oh my God, right?
My God. Yes, 100%.
So good. Okay, I have one last question about money and then I want to move on to celebrity energy. So you completely transformed your relationship with debt. And I think that really impacted your ability to create boatloads of money.
Totally.
Because when you came into the movement, you had debt and you had a very, I don't know how you would describe the relationship with it, but I wouldn't say it was empowered. It's certainly not the calm that it is now and the just knowing. So how did that, I'm just curious what shifted and how do you think about, like, what did you think about debt before? What do you think about debt now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think And it's so fascinating because I love that you asked what's the relationship change, because I'm like, the amount of debt hasn't shifted that much. Like I do think that
Yeah.
like I'm paying, but I also in the past I was like, am I going to get this debt payment on time? And now I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. I feel like I know that I'll be able to make the payments. I know that it's going to be paid off. But I also know that it's not a priority for me right now. And I think what
Yeah.
shifted was that I felt like it needed to be a priority to pay
Hmm.
and the reason that I felt that was coming from a lot of shame and coming from like I'm this idea that I was bad with money and that for having debt I was a bad person and or irresponsible or things like that, which we don't have time to get into all the reasons that I had those thoughts, but I think that ultimately what shifted was really just being able to shift from that into like a deep state of gratitude for the debt. And especially looking at, okay, when and why did I take this debt on? Like it was
Yeah.
when I was pregnant, like, and even almost kind of like taking a step back and being like, if I had a friend who was pregnant and they needed to use debt and like, they were betting on themselves that in the future they could pay it off, I'd be like, good for you. Like pregnant women are so vulnerable. Of course you needed that support, you know, and whether or not it was created when I was pregnant, I think just now when I make those payments, something that I really like to be, that's been really helpful for me as I'm creating, you know, savings and then investments as well now, is thinking about money as like the money that I'm creating now is paying for my past, my present, and my future. And so like just being able to think about like when I do make those debt payments, just in like gratitude and like gratitude for myself for figuring out a way, right? And like making investments in my business and taking a bet on myself that that I would be able to make it back in the future. And so I think that it's kind of now it feels like as I make those payments, it's me having my own back, but just having my own back for my past self. And I do feel pretty
Yeah.
confident that like you and I have talked about this before where I'm like, I have no idea why, but in November, I'm paying all of it off. And it's so funny because like right now and it's like $80,000 of debt. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to pay it all in full in November. And I don't know why I think I feel so confident about that, but I just feel so certain about that I don't feel pressure to like, hurry and pay it off now, or, you know, make these like crazy payments. It's just, and I think that part of it is just knowing that I'll always be making money. And really, I feel like at the end of the day, that's the biggest transition. It's just been this identity shift of being like, I'm a person who always knows how to make money. And I've gotten to the point that it is like a faucet that I know how to turn on. And like, and so that's what's going to then at some point, apparently in November, I guess we'll see, but is going to lead to me being able to pay that off, whether or not, and letting go and all of that, I think just really released a lot of the shame around it, which helped change my relationship with it.
100%. I remember you stepping into that because I remember we worked on a month of like just picking one thought you want to step into. And so for some reason, I'll just side note, I don't remember anything in my like outside life. Like I'll watch a movie and I will forget it the next day. My husband will be like, we saw that movie. I'm like, I never saw that movie. He's like, we saw it together. I can't remember anything. But when it comes to my clients, I literally remember everything. It's insane. So I remember like this was months and months and months ago. And we were working on in the money manifestation movement. This was before you were in the mastermind. And we were working on like pick one thought that you want to believe by the end of the month. And yours was that I can create money. And I remember it didn't take you long, but like when you stepped into that belief, that's when things started to shift. You started making money. Then, you know, you started feeling more empowered. And then of course, when you believe that you can make money, why would you worry about debt? Right? Like, you believe you can pay it off. So it's so good. And you really have stepped into an identity of like, I'm good with money too.
Yeah.
I've seen you do that, which is so amazing. And what a difference. And really it is just a shift in your mind. Like circumstances don't have to change. This is a shift in your mind and then it will reflect in your reality. And Whitney is the perfect example of this. Like she just decided, no, even nothing changing. I'm just going to believe that I can create money, like that I know how to create money, practice that thought over and over, and then started seeing the evidence of it. So It's so awesome. And you're such an inspiration. So thank you so much for sharing your story about that and about, your transformation. It's totally incredible. And I
Thank
want to
you.
shift gears quickly and talk a little bit about what you do, because I think it's so cool and it's so unique. And if you are on TikTok or Instagram, go follow Whitney Uland, because her work is just so fun. Her reels are amazing. Her TikToks are so good. So tell me a little bit about celebrity energy and what it is and who can utilize it.
Totally. So, okay. So a little bit of like, I guess the context of it is that I believe that fame is just like money. It's a resource. It's the resource of having people's attention on you. And once you have this resource of fame, then you can leverage it for things that you want, right? We see maybe like influencers or celebrities leveraging that for experiences or for fame or for premiere status or things like that. But you can also leverage your fame, leverage the having people's attention in order to, change the world. And so what I really believe in, like who I help are people who have these really important missions and who want to get them out in the world. I really believe that the best, like in the past, fame has been even, I believe it's more taboo than money, right? Like we all kind of have talked about how like it's taboo for women to say, that they want to make money, or for anyone really to say, I want to make money, but
Totally.
to say I want to be famous is like even more like cringe, and like no one wants to admit that, right? So I joke that it's like my page is a safe space to admit that you do want to be famous, and to use that resource for good. And the way that we do this is exactly like how you create money, right? You create the identity first. And so that identity is creating what I call celebrity energy. It's kind of like the it factor, right? It's, I always like to say, like, I live in Los Angeles, and so I see celebrities all the time, but I was raised in a really religious home where I wasn't allowed to watch television or like read magazines, things like that. So I never know who celebrities are, but I can always tell that they are somebody, right? And they have that it factor. They have that magnetic pull. And so what I do is I help my clients to create that it factor, so that instead of just having the resource of fame, you're creating, essentially you become the asset where people are drawn to you and they want to give you their time, give you their attention, and ultimately oftentimes their money. So just really, sorry, I don't know if this is like a longer, I could talk about this all day. Obviously, this is what I really care about.
Keep going. Tell us all the things.
Yeah. But like, if you think about like our primal brains, we're really wired for survival. And that means don't upset your tribe, right? Don't upset anyone. And if you're going to step out into, like, I like to think about the clients that I work with, they're stepping from like an artist to a celebrity, or from an entrepreneur to creating an empire, or to be a thought leader, right? And there is such a identity shift. But in order to do that, you have to stand out in the world and you have to say things that ultimately can be triggering to people, right? To stand up, like, whether you're a person of color or a woman, or like I'm a queer woman, or things like that. And just to say defiantly, this is what's important and this is what matters. It really goes against all of our primal instincts. And, furthermore, you think about like we're wired to exist in a tribe of maybe 120 people. And suddenly, so like our brains are not hardwired to be perceived by millions of people online, right? Which is ultimately what fame is. And so the work that I do is really just about creating that safety, being seen in massive ways, and creating that really, like, I'm sure that anyone who's listening to this, you have your favorite, whether it's an influencer or a coach or whatever, where there's plenty of people shouting information online, and they might even have big followings, but they're not someone that you connect to. And that's usually because they kind of have these blocks. And so if their page disappeared, you might not even know their name to go and follow them on the other platforms. And so really it's about creating that it factor, so people are attached to you and care what you have to say. So it's a lot of fun. I love it.
I love that. So the it factor starts with your identity, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an identity that you can step into, that ultimately it's fun too, because you can learn how to turn it on or turn it off. So like, if you want to be perceived at certain times versus not, but we have to learn how to do it at those like really pivotal moments, right? Like if you're a celebrity and you don't want to be recognized at the grocery store, you might choose to turn it off, but you might want to turn it on when you're making a television appearance, or you're on a podcast, or you're sharing your work on TikTok or things like that.
Totally. Totally. So I'm just curious, would you say this identity piece and this turning it on and off, is it a feeling or is it like a thought you're stepping into? What is that? Like when you notice that shift, because you can shift it on and off, what is it for you?
So it's like at the most basic level, it's really just safety. And it's kind of, so one of the things that they say, I grew up as, or I, came up as an actor. And one of the things that they say is they're like, don't ever act with a dog or a baby because they're going to pull focus. So if you're on stage with a dog or a baby, no one is going to watch you. They're just going to watch the dog and the baby because they're so present that you can't help but watch them. And what happens is because we have these like primal instincts or whatever, our brains just energetically put walls up. Because we think that we're going to be under attack if we show up in these really vulnerable ways. So it's a combination, of course, of your thoughts and your feelings. Like that's what the energy is, but it's ultimately about, and like, I like to say like, being an entrepreneur, being an artist, it's like a video game, right? Where maybe there's a different number of followers or a different money amount or whatever, but that number is going to keep growing if you want to keep growing and if you want to continue building an audience. And so the process that I teach, I worked with clients from, if it's a influencer, they're just starting out or they're trying to hit that million mark. And same with my entrepreneur clients. Some of them are just getting started. Others are doing 250K months, that kind of thing. And it really, the process is the same. I have a 6-step process that I teach people how to continue just like up leveling and like, it's like slaying the dragon at every single level kind of thing so that you can continue like expanding your audience and create more and more safety so that eventually, you're able to hold space to be seen by, like a mass, like an arena size of people. And so it just like keeps growing. So it's really fun.
I love that. And that makes so much sense because as, I mean, I don't coach, famous people or celebrities or anything, but I mean, they're, growing into celebrities as, entrepreneurs and everything. But I do notice one of the biggest blocks is just not feeling safe. Like, I want to grow my business to 1 million, but I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe of what's going to be in the comments, of what I'm going to see in the reviews and that kind of stuff. So it makes so much sense that stepping into celebrity energy is actually learning how to create safety. That's huge.
Yes.
I love that. I didn't really recognize that piece, but I love it. That's so good, Whitney.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like I do think that the most common, and this is kind of why I'm so passionate about what I do, is that like, most people, it's like when we're coaches or healers or whatever, or artists, we have these important missions and they're because we want to help heal the world and because these things have helped us heal. And so we're always thinking about other people, but that kind of then can become our downfall, right? When it's like, we're thinking about, like so many entrepreneurs, like their biggest fear is being canceled and having a Reddit thread written about them or whatever it is. Right. And so it's about creating the safety so that you can continue showing up at every level of your career. Cause even like Taylor Swift, I was at the Taylor Swift concert the other night and there were people on their phones the entire time because they didn't care about Taylor Swift, right? Like there's always going to be people that dissent to whatever it is you're saying. But if you have that relationship to yourself and you have that identity and you have that safety, then you'll be able to just continue growing and just continue like blowing your mind. So it's really fun.
So good. So for anyone who wants to be able to create safety as they grow, as they step into celebrity energy, where can they find you?
Probably actually, I think that when this podcast episode launches, it's going to be around the same time. So definitely check me out on Instagram and TikTok. But I think by the time this airs, I'm going to have a new YouTube channel. And so my program is How to Be Famous with Whitney Uland. And so if you Google that or whatever, you can find my podcast, my YouTube channel, my programs, or just follow along on TikTok and Instagram. So
go follow it all of you go follow it. It's so good. Oh my God. Thank you, Whitney. It's so good. I'll put all of this in the show notes too, so that if anyone wants to connect with Whitney, you can go down to the show notes, check her out. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing all of your inspiring stories, your thoughts, what you do. It's just so awesome. And thank you for having been in my world and having me as your coach. It's been amazing.
Thank you. I'm just so grateful for you. And thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope this episode is something that you'll be able to add to your manifestation toolbox to come back to when you need a little extra motivation. If you like what you've heard today and want to take it deeper, you've got to come check out my signature coaching program, the Money Manifestation Movement. It's the place where you'll not only learn manifestation, but you'll begin to live it alongside me and an amazing community of like-minded entrepreneurs doing this work together. Head on over to jamieberman.com to learn more.